Good morning. It is very early on Saturday. We're getting to the point in the campaign season. So today is September 24th. We are getting to the point in the campaign season where random drive-through workers are noticing that I look tired. So running for office as a regular person is a lot. I mean, when you have a full-time job and you're a parent like I am, running a campaign on top of that is a lot to throw into the mix. And I don't mind doing it, but I think that we don't make, I think that to voters who haven't run for office before, it's not clear and obvious, perhaps, how much work running for office takes. And additionally, there seems to be this sense among some folks that they want you to show that you really want it. Well, if it's a public service that we're doing, it's hard to reconcile those two things. How is this a job that you're doing as a public service, and that is supposed to be, somehow less profitable and less advantageous than your regular career, but also be something that you really, really, really want, and you're willing to drop everything to do? Kind of a weird thing to reconcile those two, and probably not the best thing to do to ask people who really are professionals that are interested in the job. It's kind of a weird juxtaposition in this game show that is the job interview. I digress, though. So for those of you who are joining, the way that these run, they're very casual. I'm in my PJs. No makeup. This is totally how I look on Saturday mornings. The debates are coming up, and makeup has been a topic that has come up with debates. But this is, whether or not the camera's on Saturday and Sunday mornings, this is how you'll find me. I'm lounging around in PJs until the kids get up and going and get into activities. I try really hard to make it obvious and clear to voters that what you're getting is me. This isn't dolled up or an act or something that is polished and put on for you, because I think a lot of politics doesn't make that clear. I think a lot of politics is very shiny and polished and gives us what we want to see, but not what is, and that creates really bad policy. So swinging back to the debates, this upcoming week we have possibly debates. So Monday I am scheduled to be on Maine Public. Originally, that was a debate that Bruce Poliquin had not RSVP'd to, and that's not out of character for Bruce Poliquin. I'm happy to take punches at people when they deserve a punch, but he was upfront in 2018 that he wasn't going to attend that debate. He was upfront this year that he wasn't going to attend the debate. I think it's unwise and not appropriate, if you're running for office, to not make yourself available for numerous public debates if you're running for office. I think that voters really deserve a chance to see you, 2 or 3, probably at least 3 times for each season if you are running for statewide or federal office, because not everybody has a great day. There's not enough time in an hour to cover all the issues. Like Congress in particular, there's just a huge mess of issues that are covered. So I RSVP'd yes to all 4 debate opportunities that I was offered this year. Actually, RSVP'd to a 5th one that isn't run by the local media. It's going to be run, I think, by one of the high schools up north. Haven't gotten the details on that yet. But that's going to be happening in October. But this week there were supposed to be at least 2, if not 3 debates. The dates of the debates kind of went back and forth and nobody was quite sure, but there was definitely supposed to be Maine Public, and then on Tuesday there's another debate. It looks like Monday it's just going to be me. Darren Golden decided that for somebody who was trying real hard to use me as a shield to not have to be in the other debates, by saying that he didn't want to be in a debate that I wasn't included in. He didn't want to show up to the debate that all 3 of us were offered RSVP'd to, and then he didn't want to debate me. And I'm not surprised. So I don't think I'm a wizard or somehow superhuman, but I do think that I know more about most of these policy areas than either of the gentlemen running, which is terrifying since they both are or have been congressmen. And it's not fun to debate somebody who knows when you're not doing your job well. Um, and I think even a mediocre attorney could show that. So neither of the gentlemen are doing the job well. So on Monday, you're going to see me on Maine Public. It's going to be live on their channel and streaming on the show, or streaming on their app. We're just doing a 30-minute conversation. Sounds like it's going to be me and Jennifer Brooks. I like Jennifer. Be fun. We'll talk about some issues. I think they might be taking questions. I'm happy to answer questions, but I'm happy to answer questions in any format. As anyone who attends these events, the Breakfast with Tiffany or the Tuesday town halls, they're really both town halls. They're just slightly different formats. Anybody who attends these knows that I'm happy to answer almost any questions. We've had some folks joining. If you are joining and you have questions, comments, concerns, the format on these is I start out just sort of chatting about what's going on this week. And as questions come up or comments come up, I address those very much like you would at a regular town hall, although at a regular town hall, I probably wouldn't be in pajamas. But it's just like having a microphone or having a note card passed to you with those questions getting answered. So please drop those in. If I'm talking, don't feel like you can't ask questions. I'm talking to give you time to ask questions. So the debates are coming up, and I'm looking forward to those because I think that we've got a lot of policy issues that aren't being addressed. And it's interesting to watch the gentlemen kind of play off each other. I think that Jared Golden has taken some stances that are just very departed from reality. So, for example, student loans, he thinks that student loan forgiveness is out of touch and not what people need. And that's probably because he's never had a student loan. And then Paula Quinn has taken the position that I don't know what the right thing is, but not him. We need common sense. Well, Bruce certainly didn't bring any common sense when he was in DC. He voted for all sorts of nonsense. Of the three of us, I'm the only one that has a bunch of common sense. So, but common sense is one of those phrases that, people who use it don't usually mean it. And it's unfortunate because we do need folks that are in DC that really are paying attention. This morning, I thought what I'd talk a lot about. It's something that's come up, and it's interesting to watch. So there in the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a parent provision. I haven't made it through the act yet. I printed it out, but good gravy, my schedule has just been so much. And if it were my full-time job to read these bills, of course I would have read it. I've had a few people that are like, well, you're running for office. Why haven't you read it yet? And I'm like, I don't know, because I have a full-time job and I have children and it's hundreds of pages. Bills are much longer than they need to be. But there's a provision in there apparently that adds IRS agents, which we need. And there are very few reasons why you wouldn't want IRS agents added. One of them would be that you like fraud and don't want to get caught. As someone, I have an estate I've been trying to close out for a while, and the pandemic has really muddled it, and the not being enough agents has muddled it. And every single time I try to call into the IRS, I end up on hold for an hour or more. A lot of times I don't even get through. I just give up, or I end up on hold and they have to transfer me and I get disconnected, or I get disconnected before I even get through to someone. They are clearly and obviously an understaffed agency. And we need the people that are doing the work. And right now, they only have the ability really to catch a lot of the super easy technical violations. And those happen to hit people who are not well-to-do. That kind of fraud, the people who don't have tax attorneys that on staff to find ways around, to maneuver things, to, take those write-offs that aren't risk adverse. It's people who are poor that are getting most of those. In fact, I think they're audited at a rate. I've seen several different numbers, but it's by a margin of quite a bit. The folks who are not wealthy are the ones who are audited. So it's disappointing to see Republicans who like to tell you how anti-fraud and anti-corruption they are, pushing back against enforcing people being caught for fraud and corruption. It's astonishing to me. But even without the fraud and corruption, which is very important and we absolutely need to pursue, we're in a position that just folks who are calling in, a lot of times I run into this in family cases when there was a child tax credit. Astonishing that that went away, but apparently neither party is a big fan of helping folks. But when there was the child tax credit, a lot of folks in Maine, it's very common here to have shared primary residency and to alternate tax benefits year in, year out. And the way that those were distributed across a couple of years made it really difficult for people to call up and ask the IRS, like, hey, what's going on? Who's supposed to be getting these benefits? They're auto depositing me. They should go to her. Do I need to pass them back? Are these mine? Are these hers? It was confusing and difficult. And when people would call in, they could sit on hold with IRS for free for 1, 2, 3, 4 hours, multiple phone calls, or they could pay an attorney to do it, or they could pay an attorney and ask questions. And because the law wasn't quite clear yet on that, a lot of times the question, the answer would be, I don't know. I can go look it up, but it's brand new stuff. So we haven't dealt with this yet. So, that happened with stimulus payments, that happened with child tax credits. And it happens all the time with people who have small businesses or just have questions or don't understand why a return didn't get where it wanted or where it was supposed to go. Or do you have old account information for deposit? Did it not get updated when I turned in my taxes? Is there a glitch in the software? My ex and I split up. Did you send the return to her? All of those questions are questions that are maybe not super exciting, but need to be answered. And a lot of them can't be answered on a website because the answer for a lot of them is it depends. It depends on how you filed. It depends on a bunch of things that wouldn't be easy to put on a website. And we don't have the staffing for that. It's an understaffed agency. And that is incredibly problematic. So it is funny to me to watch it be controversial. It shouldn't be controversial. It's an agency that collects the revenue that the government runs on, that is understaffed. You should probably make sure you staff agencies that collect the money that are needed to deliver services. Seems pretty basic to me. So we've had a few more people join. If you have questions, comments, concerns, please drop them in the chat. I usually start these out talking about something so that you have time, if you have questions, to type those out. I have all the time in the world for you today, but I want to make sure that you have time to answer questions, and nobody wants to hear me talk all day. That would be not very exciting. And eventually I do have to head up to Farrington to the fair. Children aren't up yet. So I had something else I wanted to talk about with taxes. I've been thinking a lot. So we have a lot of social services agencies, and they're currently administered mostly state. So if you lose your job and you need food or you need housing assistance or you need medical care, you go and you apply. In the state of Maine, it's at DHHS. Different states call it different things. And most of those funds are federal. Sometimes they have matching local. And you apply for services. And right now we have just a whole bunch of hurdles, and it is an exhaustive process. And there's sort of this philosophy that is pervasive in our agencies because they do a lot of the fraud detection, that there's this question that comes up a lot of times, and you can see it in the agents' disposition and in their training, that basically their job is to find ways to deny you benefits, sort of like insurance agencies. And it is a form of insurance. And as we've been talking about fraud in the context of IRS agents coming up, and that they are very good at catching low dollar folks who maybe make a mistake and making it look like fraud or whatever, I've been thinking that maybe we should be reconfiguring these agencies. The experience I want my clients to have, and the experience, if heaven forbid I ever need these services, I want to be able to go in and say, look, my life imploded. I've paid into these services my whole life. Can you help? And the response I want back is not, fill out these 687 forms with all sorts of paperwork you may or may not have while your children are sitting there screaming, and we'll get to you in a few hours. That is not the experience I want to have. That's not the experience I want my clients to have. That's not the experience I want any of us to have. I would like the experience that people have when they're applying for benefits to be, oh my gosh, let's get you taken care of. You know, you have paid into these programs your whole life. You paid for us to make sure that there's a space that if you need help, we give it to you. Let's get you helped. Let's get you taken care of, you know, and they shouldn't have to care if you're there because of domestic violence or job loss or car accident. Shouldn't matter. They should say, you know what, if you are here in our offices and we don't offer all that much support, you must really need it. So we're going to take care of you. And we're going to make sure that at least this part of your experience, for whatever tragedy you have going on in your life, if your partner died, if you had to leave, just a toxic situation, if you've had a series of life events, often when you're in needing DHHS support services, it's not just one thing. Everything is sort of collapsed in itself. The dog is trying to join ours this morning. He's delicious. Are you delicious? Yes, he wants to hold hands. He's very sweet. He's romantic. And I want us to have that experience when we're at that low point in our lives. We do not have a society that is particularly compassionate to those sorts of needs when it comes to the agencies delivering them. And because our IRS is so very good at catching low dollar fraud, I think that we should look at shifting the burden of catching fraud and shifting the burden of catching people who are being bad actors. Why not shift it to IRS? I mean, we have your social security number. They're way better at catching it than DHHS. We don't have to treat everybody like a potential criminal. We could just treat people like folks that need help. It would cost us way less man hours. And all we'd have to do is just switch those benefits to being reportable. If at the end of the year somebody has made too much money, we can take a look at it and say, all right, did you make too much money overall, or did you have a hard time at the beginning of the year? And oh my goodness, very friendly dog today. He wants to say hi, huh? Are you just missing us? He's been sleeping in our 11-year-old's bedroom instead of our bedroom. So I feel like, are you a little lonely? Is that your problem? You do sleep on a bed though. Oh my goodness. Yes, lots of love for the dog. He's a leaner and a hugger. So give me just a second. Do you want to go outside for a minute, pup? Can I let you outside so I can finish this? Give me about 15 seconds. I'm going to go open a door so this one can go out for the morning because he's wanting a lot of love. Okay, sweetie. Come on. Let's go outside. Go outside real quick. I'll be right back. You are so much today. It's very sweet, but so much. All right. There you go. Good morning. I apologize for that. You can see that he was very into us this morning. So why aren't we shifting that burden? That way we could catch people. And while I was gone, we had a few people join. If you have questions, comments, concerns, please drop them in the chat. It doesn't have to be related to what I'm talking about. So because we do have an agency that's very good at catching fraud, particularly the administrative check boxes and the fairly perfunctory fraud, why don't we have that there? You know, if people have received social services, it comes through, there's a red flag. Oh, hey, this person received SNAP, which is food stamps. And food stamps used to be actual stamps. Now they're debit cards. You know, here's somebody who received SNAP or TANF. TANF is what we think of as cash welfare. That's where you get it's temporary assistance to needy families. That is the check. We used to think of that as the welfare check. That's now TANF. There's just an accident outside of my home. You know, why don't we have that be the system that flags it? Hey, we've now seen your income. We saw that you got benefits. We're just going to take a closer look and make sure if those benefits were done at a time when you really did have no money. People who are wealthy sometimes aren't that wealthy. A lot of times what we see of wealth in our society is a veneer. I know that's shocking to everybody here. But it happens where sometimes people will have a house, but they run out of cash. And when you have a house but run out of cash, that doesn't mean that you have liquid assets that you can attach. Part of the problem with our systems for social welfare is they have assets tests as a part of means testing, but a lot of times if you have an asset, you can't necessarily get rid of it. If you have a car, even if it's a fancy car, if you sell it, how are you going to find a job? If you sell it, how are you going to get to and from places? And no matter how much your car is worth, most people don't have a paid off car unless it's an older car. Our cars in our house are paid off. They're 2015 and 2016, like they're older cars. Most people don't pay cash for their cars. Most people, if they have a house, if you've had a disruption, like if you lost your job, you can't take out a home equity loan. They require you to have employment. You don't have access to those cash resources. And if you're on unemployment, depending on the size of your mortgage, most unemployment benefits max out at a rate that won't cover a lot of mortgages in today's marketplace because the caps were set at a different time in the economy. So, for example, good luck getting a house for under $300,000 or $400,000 in some areas of Maine. It's just not possible. And those mortgages or rent is often as much or more than a mortgage. Those are often higher than what benefits will pay out in some areas. So I think it's a better place to catch fraud. It's more financially efficient. It's more humane. It makes more sense. And then what we can do is we can pull all the people that are doing fraud in our social services agencies and say, let's refocus this and let's make our social service agencies about helping people when they need help. The fraud stuff, we'll catch it later. It's fine. We're not going to cause harm to people at bad times in their life. We're not going to take somebody who's going through a tragedy, who really needs help, and treat them like a criminal. That's not the time to do it. If they're one of those icky people that just is willing to tempt fate and karma and really, they've got millions in the bank and they just want to go get $200 in food stamps and waste like an hour of their life to do that, catch them on the backside. It's not hard. And the IRS would be perfect at that. I'd love to see us do that. That will take work at the federal level. It's also going to take partnerships at state levels. It may take a while to roll out. We may have to start with states like Maine that I think if you presented that picture would be like, yeah, like let's have it so people when they need help, when they've gotten widowed or they're leaving domestic violence, can we make their lives easier? I don't want to make their lives hard. Let's do that. I think Maine would find that very palatable. Some states are a little bit more cruel and they want to really show that at least the administration and the folks that they elect, they really want you to prove it, or they've got maybe some icky people working for them. Brett Favre got a lot of money out of welfare for some very not welfare things. So a lot of times those sorts of scandals pop up and there is incentive to get your hand in the cookie jar. I also think that moving to the IRS for enforcement would make it a lot more clear for that too. Right now, in a lot of states, they just put such stringent requirements on welfare recipients that they end up denying people who really, truly need the help, causing unnecessary pain. And then there's money left over and they could say, oh, well, there's all this extra. So, we need to use this appropriately. And again, that there's a real temptation to put hands in the cookie jar then. So I think that would be a really good thing that we could do. I think it's going to require federal. I'd love to have that be something that we work on because you know what? It takes care of solving real pain for everyday Americans. And it also, for the people it's not helping, gives us the assurance that when we need the help that we have paid for our entire careers, it's there for us. And I think that we could apply that to a lot of areas like disability services. Right now, also have the factors. So here we have people that we know are disabled and they can't get any resources. And it's a huge problem. Why would we do this? And I think that getting a real healthcare system is going to take something like that. I suspect, just thumb in the air, if I'm guessing, I think it'll be a universal hybrid system we end up with. I'm not sure what it'll be. I think in the meantime, we should be taking the ACA. We should be increasing some competition in the marketplace by letting people buy into Medicaid, which is Maine Care here, but it's got a different name in every state. I think that we could be then using, the decreases in premiums and the extra premiums received by Medicare to be delivering better services, fixing reimbursement rates, making it so it's a more usable insurance coverage for both people taking it, so the doctors receiving payments, delivering services, and patients. But I think at the end of the day, that's a bad model. I think that we can improve it. I think we should improve it. I think we should improve it until we have something better. I think that the marketplace has some real flaws. Market forces are wonderful, and powerful, but they also have a very dark side. And when you're talking about people's lives and health and well-being, market forces are maybe not the best driver of how to improve the system. The guardrails required can be put in place, but to have good guardrails, what you need is people putting those guardrails in that aren't motivated by profit. We still have a ton of people in Congress that trade stocks. We still have a lot of lobbyists giving, sliding people fat on the side. We have our members of Congress are deeply underpaid for the job that they do. And it sounds like they make a lot of money, but I actually can make way more per hour as an attorney than I'll ever make in Congress. I don't work as many hours. That's the other problem. They work a ton of hours for not enough per hour. And I periodically will post my budget on social media. I probably should do it again. The amount of money that people make for the job that they do when they're required to keep two homes, and one of those homes is in one of the more expensive places in the country to live, if not the most expensive, depending on the year. If we have people with kids and student loans and just life expenses, there really isn't enough money after you pay taxes on that salary to live that life. And, I'm excluding all the stuff that's sort of a must, but I guess doesn't have to be a must, so I don't have in my budget, for example, I don't have a budget for fancy dinners. I don't have a budget for designer clothes. I mean, I'm honestly fine going to the fancy dinners and just having some costume jewelry and a black suit and calling it good. But a lot of people do dress up for those swank events, and just have a phenomenal amount of clothes. They really do want members of Congress to dress more professionally than maybe today's society asks for. There's dry cleaning bills. Like it's expensive. It's a very expensive lifestyle. I've sort of gotten away from suits as an attorney. Maine doesn't really require you to wear suits. I'm fine in the less than $20 BJ's dress and JCPenney sale rack cardigan. That flies in Maine court. It doesn't necessarily fly in DC. So I think that we have a lot of people making these rules that are getting their primary income from sources other than the congressional pay. And you don't want that. I mean, we have a huge amount of members of Congress that receive PPP loans, those forgivable PPP loans, and they just stuck that right on in their pocket. And that's not okay. I received PPP loans. I received, it's public knowledge. It's online. I received 2 for $7,500 each in, different years. And they were less than I would have made on enhanced unemployment, but I was trying to work still. And I had to homeschool my kids. I had 2 kids for a whole academic year and for honestly almost the entirety of 2021 because I waited till they were vaccinated to send them back. One of my children is medically vulnerable. He has the equivalent of allergic reactions to viral infections. So we didn't know if COVID was going to be a rash for him or if it was going to be an EpiPen in the ER or something worse. So we kept him home until our children were fully vaccinated. And, that's how we ate, is that I had to take those PPP loans. But, $7,500 a year is a very small amount compared to the millions and millions and millions of dollars that just went out in just handouts. I mean, a lot of those PPP loans ended up as handouts to the rich. And I think I'm very forthright about disclosing when I've received a benefit. But we had people in Congress that were receiving, close to $1 million or more of PPP loans. And that's just not, um, they designed a program to benefit themselves. And that's the problem that we have when we have a for-profit insurance industry, even if it's Medicare for all, is we have people that are looking for ways to slice out bits for themselves and their family and their friends. Um, and they're doing that while they're making policy. And that those ethical conflicts are just, there's just a lot. We aren't living in the system that the United States was designed for. We're sure a lot of the people who were there were wealthy and landowners, but there wasn't stock trading like there is today. There wasn't ways to the scope and scale that there is now to be able to slide money out of places and slice that out. It's very different when you've got, a farm versus, giant multinational global companies where if you can impact policy, there's a lot of ways to get cash. So I am deeply concerned with the corruption that we have in DC, and even the people that maybe aren't trying to be corrupt. They're just trying to survive with the pay, and that's how they do it. There's still incentives to be profoundly icky. So um, the kind of a meandering way to answer the Medicare for all question. I think that we do need to improve our healthcare system. I do think we need to expand access, but I think we also just need to redesign our system. Our system we have right now is fundamentally flawed. It is designed to deny benefits because that's how insurance models work. Insurance models are about making sure they maintain profitability, or at least don't go net negative, even if they're a net, and they're not for profit, they still don't go net negative. And the way they accomplish that is by denying services. And I don't think that we need to include all services. If your needs are truly cosmetic and you're on your sixth boob job, I don't think that that's necessarily a public good that we need to pay for. I wouldn't ask people if I had that hobby to pay for it. I think that's a pretty interesting thing that we shouldn't be, great if you want to do that to yourself, but I don't think that that's a public good that we're necessarily conveying. That said, I think that we're going to have a lot of conversations around what is elective and what is not elective. Right now, a lot of elective things aren't really elective. A lot of non-emergency things aren't really non-emergency. You're just not literally bleeding out on the table. So I think that there are lengthy and in-depth conversations around redesigning a medical system that actually gets us the services we paid for. We certainly have paid enough. We deserve this system. It's just that people are so busy cutting out slices of profit that we don't get it. But talking about that, it doesn't fit well in a tweet. It doesn't fit well in a soundbite or a meme. You can't answer that question in 30 seconds on a news show. And so our media and the way that we talk about things has really taken away from the ability to have those thoughtful, deliberative, meaningful conversations around very big policy areas like, what do we want our healthcare system to look like? What do we want our social support network, which is tied to the healthcare system, to look like? I had an interview with BDN, and I was talking about like all of these pieces work together. That is the problem. We have such an interwoven set of needs. So when we're talking about healthcare, we're not just talking about healthcare. We're talking about, well, what are we doing for tuition costs and student loans because people can't afford to provide healthcare in rural areas about that? Well, what are we doing about housing? Because if housing is off the hook, then we can't have people provide at a reasonable salary those services when we factor in the tuition and their student loans. Well, what are we doing about inflation and local manufacturing? Because again, we can't tie those in. Inflation's a topic that's come up a lot. There's limited things that we can do about that. I mean, we need to be pulling in a lot of stuff So the only way we can really conquer inflation long term in this country is by correcting whatever's causing it. So for right now, I mean, most of our inflation that we have right now is actually caused by the pandemic and its supply chain issues, and that creates scarcity and demand and wonks out all the prices. But there's not a lot of quick fixes for these problems. So inflation, though they can tamp it down, the way that they're tamping it down with interest rates does a lot of harm to people that aren't economically advantaged. The longer term solutions and making sure that we have manufacturing at home for at least some of this, that we have some food sovereignty. International commerce is great, but when you have supply chain issues, they really become obvious and collapse very quickly when you are that global of a society. Fixing that is a bigger issue. Fixing housing, again, that's a bigger issue. Fixing student loans, like these are all very big issues, and they all tie together in ways that I think that our current Congress doesn't have the intellectual curiosity and the emotional capacity to negotiate and the desire for public benefit that would be required to have conversations that fix these problems. And that is something that's very hard to combat with our current system of hiring people. Very long answer to the Medicare question. I hope it helped. A few more people have come on. We've been going for about 40 minutes. I have all the time in the world for you. If you want me to keep going, I'm happy to do so. If you have questions, comments, concerns, please place them in the chat. I'll talk for at least another minute or two in case any other questions pop up. I don't want you to feel like you're leaving this with unanswered questions. One of the things that really frustrates me as a voter is I have no way to get to other candidates, just as a voter, not even as a candidate. It's very difficult to find open forums to have these conversations because, generally, but specifically, Golden and Poliquin don't really do town halls. They don't really do unscripted answers. The debates are hard for them because they have to prepare and make sure they have all these different sound bites memorized for the different questions they could be asked. And they can kind of guess the topics and hope that those sound bites work with the questions. I don't do that. I mean, I don't have debate prep. My life is too full for debate prep. You either know the answer or you don't. You can answer questions on the fly or you can't. If you can't, and that's a failing, you acknowledge and you say, I'm bad at questions on the fly, but I can give you my perspective. That's not, unfortunately, how the other candidates react. So I try really hard to be accessible, to have open flow question and answer periods where you can ask me whatever. I have yet to have a question I've been asked that I wouldn't answer, although I guess there's probably some about like my personal life that I would find awkward and not particularly relevant. So, feel free to drop anything else in there. If not, Tuesday is the debate. It's going to be filmed at 1, but broadcast at 7. So I might either skip the town hall, or I might do it a different night or before or after. I haven't quite figured out how to handle that. And maybe I'll do a Twitter poll to answer that. But it will be broadcast at 7 next week. There may or may not be other debates. I'm not sure. I think one is for sure canceled, but maybe not because I'm still getting emails. That one may be converted into maybe candidate profiles that maybe aren't that different from the thing that I'm doing with Maine Public, because the gentlemen don't really want to answer questions that I ask or have their questions directly or have their answers to questions directly next to mine. It usually didn't turn out that well for them in 2018. If you want to see those debates, if you want to see me debating the gentlemen, since they're not going to show up again this year probably, or only going to show up once, those are on the YouTube channel, so you can see the debates. I didn't get a lot of airtime, and I suspect they're probably going to fix that a little bit this year. At least that's kind of the information that I have been given. So the other one might go on regardless, but they're not sure on that yet either. So we'll see. We'll see if there's other debates. But I'm going to keep doing these generally. Tuesday town halls, slightly more structured than this. And then breakfast with Tiffany. So Tuesday town halls, 7 p.m. unless I've got a conflicting event. Saturday mornings, breakfast with Tiffany at 8. Though there may be a couple of times where I'm unable to be here at 8. So there may be, I think there's at least one that's going to get canceled in October because there's an event that will just be over the time, and so I wouldn't be able to do it. No other questions, comments, or concerns have come in. So I'm going to get my kids wrangled and get the dog fed, and I'm sure I've got a few more dog hugs coming for me so that I can head off. I think we're planning to go to the Farmington Fair today, so if you're wanting to meet me in person, feel free to find me there. I'm pretty obvious most of the time. I wear a name tag when I go to public events so that you can find me. And if you feel like you haven't gotten your questions answered or want to ask in a more private method, you can also email me through the website. I'm also Tiffany at bond4.me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. And I hope you have a truly glorious rest of your weekend.